Ron, you are the 1031 exchange expert. I have a conversation with you about the typical Q&As that come up with 1031 exchanges and best ways that people take advantage of the 1031 exchange, and also if there's any downfalls of the 1031 exchange that people need to watch out for. Michelle is a fantastic attorney. She's a family trust law attorney.
Thanks. It's a pleasure to join your show, Sam, and nice to meet you again, Ron. I am an attorney who's been practicing for about 25 years, and my focus is on trusts, real estate, and company formation.
Sam, thank you for having me. I'm Ron Ricard with IPX 1031. Been practicing 1031 exchanges for last week was 22 years.
Congratulations. It's quite a milestone. So, Ron, when it comes to 1031 exchanges, or what are the people that will typically use a 1031 exchange?
A lot of people think exchanges are just for really big companies or people really savvy investors. But the reality is I've done exchanges for $100 million office buildings, and I just did an exchange last week for someone selling a $32,000 lot. So it's much more flexible and much easier than most people think it is.
Where can you do a 1031 exchange?
1031 is a federal law, and so you can go into and out of any state. So you can sell in California, buy in Florida, Hawaii. You could even go to the territories like Guam and the U.S. Virgin Islands. So it has to be within the United States jurisdiction.
I wonder if it's inevitably going to be easier for a purchaser to get involved with a 1031 if they own it entirely under their name, as opposed to with like a brother, sister, a friend. For more than one owner, does it become just more complicated?
The main thing is it needs to be the same tax reporting entity selling and buying. Let's say, Michelle, you and I buy a piece of real estate together, whether we're siblings or friends or whatever, it doesn't matter. If we own it as tenants in common, or we each own a fraction of the property, then when that property sells, we can each do what we want with our individual share. Now, if we own the property in some kind of entity, like an irrevocable trust or a partnership or an LLC or corporation, now that is the entity that has to do the exchange, because that is the tax reporting entity that the IRS sees as the owner of the property. So LLC sells, LLC buys, corporation sells, corporation buys. As long as it's the same entity going forward, we're fine. Now, where it becomes problematic, and I think this is maybe what you're alluding to, Michelle, is if you own the property in an entity and the people now want to go their own separate ways. That's problematic, because now you're asking to change the taxpayer, the tax reporting entity.
Real estate in California is so expensive. And so if they have, let's say, a $3 million property, and then they can buy more than one piece of property in a different state, does that get more complicated with all the timelines?
Not really. I am doing an exchange right now for a gentleman who's buying 10 properties in Tennessee. So so your suggestion of selling one to buy multiple is perfectly fine. The biggest thing in the 1031 world is the timing. And Sam, earlier you alluded to what some of the problems are that people have when they do an exchange. Far and away, the biggest problem people have is meeting the timeline.
I have one more question about, should I have the client come in with already a buyer for that land, because maybe that's where the holdup is going to be. Without a buyer for their current land, they shouldn't be shopping for new property.
All that matters is when the escrows close, not when you go into contract. When we're doing an exchange, I think that it's the steps involved primarily you are wanting to know what you're going to buy, have an idea of what you're going to buy, but you probably aren't going to be too far down the road on making the purchases until you have yours at least in contract. If not, having the contingencies removed and a firm close of escrow date set. That's when most people start actively looking for new property.
Buy first and then sell. What makes that complicated, or how does that process work? Because that's something that I haven't really spoken too much about.
Now, the biggest issue here is the money, because in an exchange, typically you're taking the money from what you sell, and that goes to the money you're buying. But in a reverse exchange, you haven't sold your property yet, so you have to come up with the money. And lenders don't like to lend to reverse exchanges for residential real estate, because they don't want you to get the loan, but us to be on title in a shell LLC that we create.
Have you seen someone do it, leverage their current property to purchase the next property? Would that be feasible?
It's not recommended because technically if you pull money out of a property just before selling it, the IRS could view that as taxable.
What type of property can people leverage to use the 1031 exchange?
Yeah, there's a common mistake when people hear the term like-kind, because these are often referred to as like-kind exchanges. I know as an attorney, Michelle, you don't call them 1031s, you call them like-kind exchanges. Same thing with CPAs.
How would you typically describe the number of parties in this transaction?
Once the client is in contract with a buyer, we then will work with the title company so that at the close of escrow, the funds get transferred to us, not to the seller, because our job is to hold the money between the escrow being sold and the escrow being purchased.
How long does a person have to hold on to their investment property just in order to do the 1031 exchange? Can they purchase a property or a home and flip it within 6 months or 2 months?
Well, that actually is the magic word to use there, flip, because flipping real estate is not considered to be investment real estate. So the property needs to be purchased for the intention of being a business or investment property. Ideally, a lot of tax preparers like to see 2 years of rental history on a property, if it's a rental property, or 2 years of business use of the property. The tax code does not say it has to be 2 years. I've done a lot of exchanges for people who've held the property less, but the key is it needs to be property that you are not buying for the purpose of resale. So that's why if you're buying it, fixing it, and selling it, or you're buying a bare piece of land, building a house on it and selling it, you're buying that property with the intention of wanting to sell it. And that's property purchased for resale purposes. That does not qualify.
So purchasing land, building on it is not considered investment.
Right. Now, if you're going to build on the land and hold it as a rental property, fine. But if you're a developer, you buy the land, build a house, sell it off, that's development. That's not considered investment.
So that would be building condos, eventually turning them into townhouses.
As long as you're going to keep them and use them for investment purposes after they're built.
If I purchase land, build condos, rent the condos or the apartments out for 2 years or 5 years or however long it takes. Sometimes they do it for 20 years. That's been an investment for that amount of time. If I take them and then sell them, would I be able to do a 1031 exchange per unit? That's a make my money back. Sorry.
Right. No, that's a very common thing people will do is if you buy something, as a matter of fact, that was a trend a while ago. I don't see it much lately, but I've seen that in the past where you buy an apartment building or something where you can condoize it.
So then the individual units be exchanged within their own timelines.
Correct. Right. Each sale would have its own timeline for the exchange.
I have a question about what you're seeing. Is the trend for people selling in California to buy something in California, or is it going to a particular state?
I can honestly say that in the last 18 months, I've done exchanges to, I think, every single state in the country. So there is not one trend. I will say most people buy and sell within California, yes. Now, I also have done a lot of exchanges where people have sold in other states and brought their money back to California. But I mean, obviously, there's probably more money leaving California than coming in, if only because they have a highly appreciated property here. From a cash flow perspective, they may not be getting the greatest cash flow. So earlier you were talking about a $3 million house in Los Altos. Well, $3 million house in Los Altos is probably going to get you $6,000-7,000 a month in rent.
Do clients have to be mindful of do they need to be nervous about if this is their first 1031 exchange, or there's really nothing to worry about?
The only thing I would say for first timers is get educated. I'm happy to talk to people. I'm happy to talk to Sam's clients even before he takes the listing of the property, because you want to make sure the client's comfortable with how much they need to spend, the timelines associated, what they want to buy, etc. And as long as you're comfortable with that, then now when the property is sold, they know what they're getting into.
So in doing the 1031 exchange, the entire idea is to not be taxed on the funds that you're ultimately making at the time, correct?
Correct. Yeah, you're deferring paying taxes on the gain you have in the property.
Is there a chance, so do people have to take the entire amount of money that they make from the property and put it into the 1031 exchange? I believe you said to buy up is the idea.
In an exchange, you need to reinvest equal or greater to what you sell the property for. Not the gain, not the equity. It's equal or greater to what the property is sold for, to defer all taxes.